Hi everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It is Nikki Chanel here, and today we are going to be continuing our topics about HRT and transition by talking about how I actually got started on HRT. This is actually a question that I was surprised that came up so much in the course of my social media, and thus I've decided to make a video about this to explain the process that I went through from initial phone call to my doctor's office all the way up to my regular yearly checkups that I am now on. Now, this video is not going to be about the effects of HRT. We'll get into a little bit of it, but this video is more intended as a framework for anyone who is interested in starting HRT but doesn't know how the process works. This video is intended for them as to provide a framework for how to actually get started on HRT. And so we are going to be talking about three main topics. We are going to be talking about HRT research and initial phone call. Then we're going to be talking about my first visit with the doctor's office, and then we'll go into the first 90 days because overall it was a very interesting process. This may be emotionally charged at some points because whenever I talk about this I always cry because it was like a big moment in my life. But we are going to get started, okay? Now, as always, please like and subscribe and remember to hit the comment button, and please write down your comments. It always helps to learn what my fellow sisters are up to, okay? Now let us get started. Okay, then now on to our first topic. Now, our first topic is going to be about the initial phone call as well as some of the events leading up to my actual visit to the doctor's office. Now, by the time I had actually gotten around to making the phone call to start HRT, I had been transitioning socially for about a whole year by this point. I think it was about 10 months. And everyone kept always asking me, everyone that I had told I was transitioning into a female, and just everyone that was on my social media had always been asking me, hey, when are you gonna start HRT? And I don't really know why I just kind of waited so long. I think I was waiting to like the point where I actually looked feminine enough to go in there and say, yes, I want to take these pills and turn into a female. I think that's what it really was. And so finally, after doing a lot of research on it, I honestly thought that there was going to be no doctor's office where I live. I live in Boise, Idaho. And I thought there was going to be no doctor's office where I am that does HRT just the way that the political spectrum is here. And when I actually went down to Google and typed in the Google search, it was kind of surprising how many offices popped up. Obviously, there was a lot of out-of-state offices on there, but there was one that I looked up. Now, I'm not going to go into any names just for privacy concerns, but there was one that I looked up that's over in downtown Boise, and I was like, this actually looks like a promising thing. I read all the reviews. The reviews said, amazing. There was, patient responses on there talking about how they had such an amazing experience with the doctors and their staff. And so I had basically decided, okay, this is my office I was going to use. And I had been doing my research on HRT for a long time. In fact, I even wrote a paper about the effects of HRT back when I was in college. So I had been doing a lot of this, and I had a very good baseline before I even went in there and before I even made the first phone call. Now, it took me about 2 months to make the first phone call. I had started doing this research, I would say, December of 2020. And I remember I called the first time and then I hung up immediately because I was so afraid of this initial interaction. I was so afraid to go tell my story. I was worried I was gonna have to go to a therapist. And honestly, I called and hung up about 4 times. I would wait each day. I was like, okay, I got up the courage, I would call, hang up. And then finally, there was one day I called, I got a person on the phone, I hung up. Because I was just afraid, I was terrified. I was just like, what is everyone gonna think about me? Am I gonna be a weirdo? And then finally I was at the gym. I think at 2 o'clock, and I got out of there at 2:30. And I walked out to my car, sat in my car, and was like, you know what? I need to do this. This is what I need to do. And I called them, and I'm not lying, I was crying incoherently to the lady, I'm always felt different and I want to get started. And it was a horrible, it was so emotionally charged that it was insane. But luckily the girl was like, so you want to get started on HRT? I'm like, yes, I do. And she's like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. I can set you up at the doctor's office. I asked her, do I have to go to therapy first? She's like, no, you don't have to go to therapy first. So I made the initial appointment and it was in 2 months. And those 2 months were hell waiting, I will say that right now. But the initial doctor's office, that was an amazing experience. Okay, now moving on to the first doctor's visit. That was probably one of the best and saddest and most anxiety-ridden moments in my entire life. Like, it's not sad now, looking back on it, it was all tears of joy. But that was really depressing. Let me tell you, that drive over there was really hard to do, that drive. That was just so anxiety. But I walked in and went up to the front desk. It was a very nice doctor's office, has no issues, still looks the same as it did then too. And sat down. The girl brought over the paperwork for me to fill out, and I started filling out everything on there. They asked me, do you have a history of this? What's your age? You know, the kind of like general medical paperwork thing that you always have to fill out. But one of the questions on there was, what is your preferred name? And I wrote Nicole. That was the first time I'd ever actually used that name in any point, in any time. And they all have referred to me as Nicole ever since then. So they were the first people to ever like make me feel like accepting for being transgender, basically. And what happened was they walked me into the office after I got all the paperwork. There was also a question on the insurance, and I did not fill that out because I was on my parents' insurance at the time. And so I paid out of pocket for like the first 10 visits. It was a lot of money, but it was well worth it. And the girl sat me down, took the blood work, did the heart rate monitor, and she got some crazy reading because I was so nervous that I was just shaking uncontrollably. And she's like, it's okay, Nicole. It's okay, honey. You're good. You're good. And I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then she got all of her stuff done, and then she came in with the doctor. And the doctor sat down, and he was like the cutest little dude you could ever imagine. He had a bow tie that had like polka dots. He was very well dressed. Sat down and did the initial interaction with him, and we talked for about 2.5 hours. I asked him all of his qualifications, and he told me that he had over 300 patients that he was seeing. Kind of a nice, even mix of trans men and trans women. And we talked for everything. Now, a lot of the information was pulled from my MyChart examples, and I actually have a lot of the questions on here that he asked me. And let me tell you, this was the first time I had ever really told anyone at any length of detail what I was going through in my mind, basically. So let me tell you some of the questions. At what age did you feel first your gender identity did not match your physical body? That was one question. Had you told anyone, were you out? I told them I wanted to be a fit model. I had never really told anyone except for a couple of coworkers at work. Have you ever been suicidal or depressed because your gender identity does not match? Have you ever seen a healthcare provider about being transgender? Are you interested in starting hormones? If so, what are your expectations? What are your worries regarding HRT? And then also ask me if I wanted to store my eggs once I started HRT because of the lack of fertility that I now have. And I was, I think, crying through half those questions. I gave him super detailed answers. Like, he asked follow-up questions at times. And I remember sitting there absolutely crying the entire time. And basically at the end of this conversation, he said, yeah, you definitely have gender dysphoria. Like, you're kind of like a classic case. Everything kind of lines up really, and you definitely have this. In fact, writing this part of the question right now, I'm actually tearing up because that was the first time anyone had ever told me that. And yeah, it was pretty much true. Then he also asked me, do you want to start HRT? And I was like, yes, I do. Okay, now, before I start crying, I'm gonna move into the first 90 days. Okay, now moving on to the first 90 days. So, the first 90 days was mostly a lot of blood work and a lot of testing. They were basically looking for every single thing that could be an inhibiting factor to starting HRT. They were looking for medical history. They were looking for pretty much everything under the sun. I remember I was tested for a whole variety of things. And then once I was cleared for all of that stuff, they said, okay, so we are gonna get you started on a small dosage of spironolactone to get started. And I started taking the Spirano, small dosage, really small, like I think it was like 50 mg or something like that. And what happened was it was about 2 weeks later, I came back, did more blood work, got the results, and like, okay, so now we're gonna start you on a higher dosage of Spironol, and then we're also gonna put estradiol in it. So it was a slow ramp up to the maximum dosage that I'm still currently at 2 years later. And lots of testing. They were looking for blood clotting, they were looking for this, and then they started looking for testosterone levels versus estrogen levels. They wanted testosterone near zero, and they wanted this estrogen to be able to override that testosterone. That's why I do Spironol and estradiol. And they were looking for a whole variety of things. After the first month of doing HRT, I came back to them and they told me, okay, we're gonna do a mental checkup to make sure that you're still mentally sound, make sure that you're still doing good, that you don't have any depression from this. And they started asking all the questions like, do you have any regrets? Do you have any problems? What are some physical changes that you're not really comfortable with? And I pretty much answered all of them like, I'm really happy I'm actually starting to do this. Like I was mentally sound very well when doing it. Like I was extremely mentally sound. I had no problems, and they kept asking because they wanted to make sure, a lot of people have regrets when they first do it. I know talking to some of my fellow sisters, I know that some of them started HRT and then they ended up quitting after a month because they were just unsure about everything. And so that's mostly what they're looking for, is things like that. But now I told them that my only regret is I didn't do it sooner. That was really what it was. And then finally, once we achieved like maximum dosage and went through all the mental checks, went through like the first 6 months, they said, okay, you are good now to come back in about 6 months, and then we'll go into yearly checkups from there. And that's how it's been ever since. My doctor is my primary care provider now. I can ask him for pretty much anything under the sun. Like I had an issue where my toenail fell off. Something heavy fell in it. And so he looked in and he's like, oh, it'll grow back. Don't worry about it. And overall, there has just been it's been a really great experience. Like there was a lot of stuff to get involved to start HRT. But now that I'm done with it and have been on HRT for 2 years, every time I go to my doctor, he's like, wow, you look so good. Wow, you look absolutely amazing. Like I remember when you first came in here, and it's been a really awesome experience ever since that first doctor's visit. Okay, thank you for watching that video. Now, what I'm gonna say is that the worst part about getting on HRT was actually that initial phone call. My doctor's office has been super nice. They've always been accepting of me. I've never once had any issue. My doctor is a sweet, wonderful individual. I can talk to him about anything at all, and they do yearly checkups on me, make sure I'm still mentally sound all the time. I see him next in March, and it's been great. I can talk to my doctor about anything. I have him on my chart so I can message him at any point. And they have also sent over information regarding my top surgery. I can ask him, any injuries that I may have. I can go in really whenever I need to and go see him. So what I'm gonna say is that the initial phone call was the worst part to make. Like, yes, it sucked paying out of pocket for all this stuff, but now that I'm done and over with it, it's great. I have no problems and I feel mentally sound. My dysphoria barely happens anymore. And overall, I'm a much happier individual now that I'm on HRT. Now, thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. Keep the comments section happy, and please continue the conversation about it. Please let any of the people watching this video know of any other things that I may have missed regarding getting started on HRT. And we will see you for the next video, babes. This has been Nikki Chanel, and have a wonderful day.